So what actually drives us to be moral? I mean, really think about it. Is it just a cold logical calculation, or is there something deeper going on, something that's literally woven into the fabric of who we are? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, this fundamental mystery of human nature. All right, let's start with a really simple and I think pretty relatable story. Meet Hugo. He's running late, he's starving, and then he sees it, the perfect opportunity. He gets this incredibly strong urge, this desire. But then, almost at the exact same moment, another voice pops into his head, his conscience. You see, this isn't just a simple choice for him. It's a full-blown internal battle. Hugo's little struggle here, it actually points to a massive psychological puzzle. I mean, he knows it's wrong, right? But is just knowing that enough to make him stop? Or is there something else at play? Maybe a totally separate force, like a desire to be a good person that has to jump in and win the fight. This, right here, is the heart of what we're calling the motivation mystery. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with Hugo's struggle, then dig into the philosophical puzzle behind it, check out some really fascinating evidence from extreme cases, see what most people think, and then try to wrap our heads around this whole motivation mystery. All right, first up, the philosopher's puzzle. Let's break down how thinkers have tried to deconstruct our moral drive. Because, it's not nearly as simple as it looks on the surface. It's actually a clash of some really big ideas. Okay, so at the very core of this is a famous philosophical puzzle called Hume's problem. Now, stick with me here. It's basically a collision of three ideas that on their own all sound perfectly reasonable. Idea one, beliefs alone can't make you do anything. Just believing the sky is blue doesn't make you get up and dance. You need a desire, too. Idea two, our moral judgments, like stealing is wrong, are basically just beliefs. And idea three, moral judgments obviously do motivate us. So what's the problem? Well, all three of these can't be true at the same time. It's a paradox. Something's got to give. So this puzzle basically forces everyone into one of two camps. First, you've got the internalists. They believe that motivation is just baked right into the moral belief itself. When Hugo thinks snatching that sundae is wrong, that very thought contains the push to not do it. For them, the map and the engine are a single unit. But then you have the externalists. They say, nope, not so fast. They think the moral belief is just a fact, just a map. To actually go anywhere, you need a totally separate engine, like an independent desire to be a good person. Okay, so thought experiments are great, but let's look at some real-world evidence. We can actually test these ideas by looking at extreme cases, situations where that link between knowing the right thing and doing the right thing seems to completely fall apart. First up, the classic example, the psychopath. Now, here's the thing. Psychopaths can often tell you the moral rules perfectly. They can say, yes, hurting people is wrong, but they seem to feel zero internal push to act on that knowledge. It's like they have the moral map, they can read it just fine, but the engine is dead silent. But here's where it gets really interesting. The science isn't totally settled on this. Some early studies suggested that maybe psychopaths don't truly understand morality at all. But then larger, more recent studies have found, well, the opposite. It seems they do get the difference between right and wrong. They just don't care. Okay, now for an even clearer and honestly kind of tragic piece of the puzzle. This comes from patients who've had damage to a very specific part of the brain, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or VMPFC. We're talking about people who were totally normal, and then after an injury or surgery, it's like their moral compass just goes offline. There's this really powerful case of a patient known only as EVR. Before he had brain surgery, he was a total role model in his community. But afterwards, his life just completely fell apart. He got into terrible business deals, he was divorced twice, couldn't hold a job, and it wasn't because he lost his intelligence. Something else, something absolutely essential, had been severed. And here's the absolute kicker. When you test patients like EVR, they can still reason about morality perfectly. They can look at hypothetical situations and tell you exactly what the right thing to do is. But in their own lives, that knowledge has zero force. The judgment is there, but that motivational punch is just gone. This looks like a huge real-world point for the externalists, right? It suggests that judgment and motivation really are two separate things. Okay, so the clinical evidence seems to be pointing in one direction. But what about the rest of us? What does our gut tell us about all this? Well, to figure that out, let's see what happens when you just ask people. So some researchers in this cool field called experimental philosophy did something pretty clever. They made up these little stories about a character named Anna.
In the stories, Anna says that a certain action is morally wrong, but she feels absolutely no motivation to avoid doing it. Then they just asked regular people a simple question. Does Anna truly believe it's wrong?
And the results? Well, they reveal this really fascinating pattern in how we think. Look at this. When Anna was motivated but just got overpowered by a stronger desire, 80% of people said, yeah, she still believes it's wrong. If she's unmotivated because of something like depression, it's still 70%. But look what happens when she's described as a psychopath, or when there's no explanation given at all. The numbers just plummet. It seems like we're really hesitant to say that someone genuinely believes something is wrong if they don't feel that motivational push. So what does this all tell us? It strongly suggests that for most of us, our default gut-level psychology is internalist. We just intuitively link the two things together. The very act of believing something is wrong seems in our minds to come with at least some feeling of motivation to act that way. So where does that leave us? We've got a really tricky situation here, with two very different streams of evidence that seem to be pointing in completely opposite directions.
What we're left with is this central conflict, a real tension. On one hand, you have the evidence from these extreme cases, patients with psychopathy and brain damage. This hard clinical data provides these compelling real-world examples that seem to scream externalism. But on the other hand, you have the evidence from our own intuitions. The common sense way we all think and talk about morality seems to align perfectly with internalism. And so the debate continues. Is moral motivation built right in, or is it an add-on? Honestly, both philosophy and science are still searching for the answer. This really fundamental question about the source of our moral compass, well, it's still one of the great unsolved mysteries of the human mind. So the next time you choose to do your duty over following a desire, just ask yourself, what part of me actually made that call? Was it the belief itself that pushed back against the temptation, or was it something else, a separate desire to just be a good person, that ultimately won the day? It's something to think about.